My parents canceled my plane ticket at the airport and sneered, "Have fun watching us leave, broke daughter." They thought I'd be crushed, so I laughed, wrote "safe travels" on a napkin, and handed it to them. 10 days later, the "FOR sale" sign in my driveway made them freeze. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The fluorescent lights of the airport terminal hummed, a flat, sterile sound that matched the emptiness in my chest. We were at the check-in counter for our flight to Italy, a 10-day luxury tour that was, in my family, less a vacation and more a performance. "And the last bag," my father, Richard, said, sliding his platinum credit card to the airline attendant. He was a man who didn't just walk, he presided. At 65, his silver hair was perfectly coiffed, his blazer impossibly crisp. He was a retired executive who still wore his old job like a suit of armor. My mother, Cynthia, was fluffing her own hair, checking her reflection in the back of her phone. "Oh, this is going to be divine. Liam, darling, make sure you get some good pictures of me by the Trevi fountain." "Only the best, Mom," my brother Liam said with a smirk. At 26, he was the golden child, a failed entrepreneur who lived off our parents' endless funding. He caught my eye from across the mountain of designer luggage and gave me a look of pitying condescension. I just stood back, my simple carry-on at my feet, feeling like a beige sparrow in a flock of peacocks. I'd been feeling off all week, a low-grade exhaustion I couldn't shake. I'd chalked it up to the stress of the impending trip. "All right, that's Richard, Cynthia, and Liam checked in," the attendant said, sliding 3 passports back. She then looked at her screen, her brow furrowing. "And Fiona." I stepped forward. "Yes, that's me." She typed for a moment, then looked up with an apologetic wince. "Ma'am, I'm afraid I don't have an active ticket for you on this flight." "What?" I felt a cold prickle of confusion. "That can't be right. My father booked all the tickets together." My father sighed, a theatrical sound of long-suffering patience. "Oh dear," he said, not sounding dear at all. He turned to me, a smug, tight smile on his face. "Fiona, there was a change of plans." My mother and Liam stepped up to flank him, a united front of dismissal. "What change of plans?" I asked, my voice small. The hum of the airport suddenly felt deafening. "Your mother and I had a long talk," Richard said, his voice dropping into the lecture tone I'd known all my life. "We decided that your uncooperative attitude simply doesn't warrant a $10,000 vacation." I stared at him. "Uncooperative? What are you talking about?" Cynthia chimed in, her voice like ice chips. "You know exactly what, Fiona. We asked you for one simple thing. 1. Sign the papers to use the house as collateral for Liam's new business. It's for the family." The house. It was always the house. The beautiful, sprawling home my grandmother had left me. The home they all lived in, rent-free, while I occupied the small, converted attic space. "I told you," I said, my voice hardening despite the nausea rolling in my stomach. "I am not leveraging my grandmother's legacy for another one of Liam's can't-miss crypto art projects. It's too risky." "See," Liam scoffed, gesturing at me. "That's the attitude, Dad. Too risky. She's so afraid of her own shadow, she's holding the entire family back." "Exactly," my father said. He picked up his passport and tucked it into his blazer pocket. "We are tired of your ingratitude. You live under our roof." "I live in my house," I corrected him, my voice dangerously quiet. "And you contribute nothing," he finished, ignoring me. "You sit in that attic room all day drawing on your computer, a digital artist who barely scrapes by. We are trying to build a family legacy, and you are a dead weight." The cruelty of it, so casual and public, stole my breath. The attendant was looking down, pretending to be busy. A few people in the line behind us were watching. "So," I said, "you canceled my ticket, just like that." "We did," my mother confirmed, adjusting the strap of her Gucci bag. "We're not financing a vacation for someone who actively sabotages this family. We're going to Italy. You are not. My father leaned in, his smile turning into a sneer. The final, perfectly aimed blow. Have fun watching us leave, broke daughter, he whispered. Maybe 10 days alone in that big, empty house will give you time to reconsider your value. We'll be at the first-class lounge. He, my mother, and my brother turned as one. They grabbed their carry-ons and began to walk toward the security gate, not once looking back. I stood there, motionless, the blood roaring in my ears. The humiliation was a physical weight. Broke daughter. The words echoed, designed to shatter me. I watched them disappear around the corner. The attendant cleared her throat. Ma'am, can I help you with anything else? A slow, cold clarity began to push through the shock. It was a feeling I knew well, the sharp, analytical focus that I usually reserved for my work. I turned back to the counter, my face pale but my eyes suddenly very, very bright. Yes, I said, can you validate my parking? I walked out of the terminal, the automatic doors hissing shut behind me. Broke daughter. The phrase was still ringing in my ears. But as I stepped into the gray morning light, a small, genuine laugh escaped my lips. I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer. Hey, Mr. Henderson, are you sitting down? You won't believe the favor my family just did for me. They had made one catastrophic mistake. The betrayal was staggering, but their timing was perfect. The drive home from the airport was a strange, surreal fog. The radio was playing something cheerful, which I clicked off immediately, preferring the quiet hum of my modest sedan. The nausea I'd felt at the check-in counter hadn't subsided. In fact, it had sharpened. It wasn't just nerves. I was genuinely, physically ill. The stress of the last few months, coupled with this morning's ambush, had finally broken through my body's defenses. When I got home, the house was cavernous and silent. The air still smelled faintly of my mother's expensive perfume and my father's sandalwood cologne. Their presence lingered like a stain. I walked through the downstairs rooms, the formal living room no one ever sat in, the gleaming white kitchen, the dining room with its 12-foot table. This was all my house, a gift from my grandmother, a woman who had seen her son, my father, for exactly the man he was. I went up to my attic suite, the one my parents had generously allowed me to renovate. It was my sanctuary, a large, open space with angled ceilings and skylights. On one side was my modest living area. On the other, hidden behind a partition, was my real life, a sophisticated, 3-monitor command center. My family thought I was a struggling digital artist. It was a lie I had cultivated with meticulous care. In reality, I was a remote financial fraud investigator for one of the largest cybersecurity firms in the country. I spent my days tracking multi-million-dollar digital asset thefts, untangling complex money laundering schemes, and staring into the financial abyss of the world's worst people. I made a very, very good living. I just never showed it. Why the ruse? Because of them, I'd seen how they treated money. It wasn't a tool, it was a weapon. It was a scoreboard. My grandmother, Nana Alara, had understood. Never let a bully know what you have, Fiona, she'd told me, pressing the trust documents into my hand when I was 21. Especially when that bully shares your last name. And so I lived modestly. I drove a 10-year-old car. I bought my clothes from consignment shops. I let them believe I was the broke daughter, the artistic failure, because their condescension was my armor. It kept me safe. I booted up my system, the familiar glow of the login screen a comfort. My phone buzzed. A text from Liam, sent from the airport lounge. It was a selfie of him, my mother, and my father, all holding champagne flutes. The caption, "Ciao, loser, thinking of you, LOL." My stomach turned. I set the phone face down. They had forgotten one crucial thing. I pulled up the file Mr. Henderson, my lawyer, had emailed me last week. It was a scan of the final page of the trust my grandmother had established. I'd read it 100 times, but today, the words glowed. Nana Alara, bless her strategic heart, had put the house in a revocable trust. My parents were aware of it. In fact, they'd been furious about it. They knew I was the sole beneficiary. What they had conveniently, arrogantly forgotten, or perhaps never truly believed, was the birthday clause. The trust document stated, in no uncertain terms, that while I was the beneficiary, I did not have full, irrevocable control until a specific date. The property was to be managed by the executor, Mr. Henderson, until the beneficiary, Fiona Elizabeth Vance, shall reach the age of 30. My 30th birthday was in 5 days. They were going to be in Italy for 10. They had just left me, the broke daughter, alone in a house that would legally and irrevocably become mine, free and clear, long before they ever stepped foot on a return flight. They had handed me the perfect, uninterrupted window of opportunity. I picked up my phone again. This time, I wasn't just calling my lawyer, I was calling my team. I opened my secure work messenger and sent a message to my manager. Taking an emergency 10-day leave, family situation. A reply came back instantly. Everything okay? Need anything? I looked at the selfie from Liam. I thought of my father's sneer. I looked at the trust document. Everything is great, I typed back. Just have to clean out the house. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an international number. My mother. I let it ring, and ring, and ring. Finally, it went to voicemail. A text immediately followed. Fiona, answer your phone. Your father wants to discuss your attitude. I laughed, the sound dry and humorless. I was still sick, still exhausted, but a new feeling was taking root, a cold, hard resolve. I grabbed a napkin from my desk, the only paper I had nearby, and scribbled a note. I then took a picture of it and texted it to the family group chat. It said in my neatest print, "Safe travels." I blocked their numbers, all 3 of them. Then I called Mr. Henderson back. "Okay," I said, my voice steady. "They're gone, the flight has departed. Let's start the clock." "The moment you turn 30, the trust converts automatically," he said, his voice warm and professional. "I'll file the final transfer paperwork with the county. It's done. But Fiona, what are you going to do?" I looked around my attic room, then at the door leading down into the house they had poisoned with their greed. "Nana Alara always told me to take out the trash," I said. "It's just going to be a bigger job than usual." The first day after they left was a blur of fever and planning. The sickness I'd been fighting had fully taken hold, a nasty flu that left me aching and weak. But in a way, it was a blessing. It forced me to be still. It forced me to sit at my desk, wrapped in a blanket, and simply think. As I sipped hot tea and let the fever medication kick in, my mind drifted to the why. Why had it come to this? The answer was simple, and it was the same as it had always been: my father, Richard. My father worshipped at the altar of appearances. His entire sense of self-worth was tied to what other people thought of him. He'd been a mid-level executive at a firm that had respectfully forced him into early retirement 5 years ago. They'd given him a decent package, but the loss of his title, his expense account, and the daily adulation of his subordinates had broken something in him. He de-refocused all that frustrated ambition onto his family. We weren't a family, we were a brand. And the Vance brand had to be one of luxury, success, and old money elegance, even if the old money was all from my mother's side, and specifically from Nana Alara. My mother, Cynthia, was his willing accomplice. She was a woman who had married well and had never worked a day in her life. Her identity was entirely wrapped up in being Richard's wife. If he decreed that status was all that mattered, then she would pursue it with a zealot's devotion. And then there was Liam. My brother had been anointed the golden child from birth. He looked like my father, he had my father's manufactured charm, and he embodied all of their hopes. He was going to be the next generation's CEO, the brilliant entrepreneur who would restore the Vance name to glory. The only problem was that Liam was a fool. He had no work ethic, no original ideas, and a burn rate that was breathtaking. His list of failed ventures was long and embarrassing. The high-end sneaker reselling business, he bought fakes. The craft brewery, he hated beer. The dropshipping empire, he forgot to ship things. Each failure was met with a new, larger injection of cash from our parents. I, on the other hand, was the disappointment. I was quiet, I was introverted, I looked like my grandmother, not my mother, and worst of all, I was practical. I didn't perform. I'd spent my entire life trying to be invisible, but the house changed everything. When Nana Alara passed away and left me the house, the only real asset the family had, it was a declaration of war. My father had been in a silent, simmering rage ever since. For the last 3 years, they had lived in my house, treating me like an unwanted tenant. They suggested I move to the attic. They advised me on my career. And for the last 6 months, the pressure had become unbearable. Liam had a new idea, something about NFTs and luxury yachts, and he needed seed money. A lot of it. Fiona, just sign the HELOC application, my father had demanded at dinner 2 weeks ago. It's a simple signature. The bank has already approved it based on the house's value. No, I'd said, my voice quiet. What do you mean no? He'd snapped. I mean no, I'm not putting this house at risk. Liam's last business cost you $80,000. This is it's not a good idea. Liam had thrown his napkin down. You don't get it, Fiona. You have to spend money to make money. You're just a little mouse, counting your little pennies. This is the big leagues. Liam is right, my mother had chimed in, her voice dripping with disappointment. You are so small, Fiona. We are trying to build an empire and you're worried about a mortgage. It's just a house. It was Nana's house, I said, my hands tightening in my lap. And she gave it to me to protect it, not to have it auctioned off when this new empire collapses. My father's eyes had narrowed into slits. You are an ungrateful child, after everything we've done for you. Everything you've done for me? I'd wanted to scream. You mean belittling my choices, mocking my art, treating me like the family accountant while simultaneously calling me broke. But I'd said nothing. I just sat there. That was my crime. I didn't fight, I didn't yell, I just refused, and my refusal, my quiet, immovable no, was something my father could not control. It drove him insane. The canceled plane ticket was his ultimate power play. He thought that by publicly humiliating me, by stranding me, by cutting me off from the family brand, he would finally break me. He would prove, once and for all, that I was nothing without him. Lying in my attic bed, the fever finally breaking, I realized the depth of his miscalculation. He thought my silence was weakness. He thought my modest life was a failure. He had no idea that my silence was a shield and my failure was a fortress. He had forgotten the most important rule of strategy, a rule I lived by every day in my real job: never underestimate an opponent, especially not the one you've spent a lifetime ignoring. He'd called me a broke daughter. He had no idea. I wasn't the one who was broke. I was the one who held all the cards. I pulled my laptop closer, the screen illuminating my pale, determined face. It was time to call the movers. The sickness passed by day 3, leaving behind a sharp, ringing clarity. The house was mine to walk in. I went into my parents' master suite, a room I'd been tacitly forbidden from entering for years. It was a monument to their vanity. My mother's side was a sea of perfume bottles and designer bags, many with the tags still on. My father's side was dark wood, leather-bound books he'd never read, and a framed photo of him shaking hands with a local politician. In his desk drawer, beneath a pile of club membership cards, I found what I was looking for: the stack of bills. My father, in his arrogance, handled all the finances. He believed I was incapable. I sat at his desk and began to read. The mortgage was paid, of course. I paid that automatically from a separate account Nana had set up. But the rest? The property taxes were 2 months overdue. The utilities were on a final notice. And the credit card statements? I felt my stomach clench. There were 3, all of them were maxed out. Tens of thousands of dollars in debt across all of them. Dinners I wasn't invited to, clothes I never saw. A consulting trip for Liam that looked suspiciously like a spring break in Cabo. They hadn't just been living off my grandmother's legacy. They had been actively, recklessly destroying their own financial futures, all while depending on the house, my house, as their ultimate safety net. The house they were trying to leverage for Liam's next failure was the only thing keeping the collectors from their door. This changed things. This wasn't just about my hurt feelings anymore. This was about fraud. I went back to my attic and fired up my work computer. What I was about to do was a professional risk, but I considered it a moral necessity. I wasn't Fiona Vance, broke daughter right now. I was Fiona Vance, CFE, certified fraud examiner. I started with Liam. His businesses were all registered as LLCs. It took me less than 10 minutes to find the public filings. It took me another 20 to cross-reference the addresses and registered agents. They were all shell companies. He was churning money from one to the next, likely telling my father he was reinvesting profits, when in reality he was just spending. But where was the money coming from? My parents' savings were long gone, I knew that. The maxed-out credit cards only accounted for a portion. I dug deeper. I ran a soft credit check on my father, and there it was, a new loan. A business loan for $250,000 taken out 3 months ago. The applicant was Vance Innovations, LLC, with Liam as CEO and my father as CFO. The collateral. My blood ran cold. The collateral listed was not the house. The collateral was a private art collection valued at $350,000. I knew for a fact my father did not own an art collection. He owned a few hotel lobby paintings. But my grandmother, Nana Alera, had been a connoisseur. She had a small but valuable collection of mid-century paintings. When she died, she'd left them to me, not in the trust, just to me in her will. Paintings that were currently hanging in the living room and study downstairs. My father had fraudulently used my property, which he didn't even legally own, to secure a $250,000 loan for my brother's sham company. A company that had already burned through almost all of it. This was a F. Federal crime, wire fraud, bank fraud. I sat back, my heart hammering. This was the clever trap I'd been waiting for. My original plan had been simple: evict them, change the locks, sell the house, be done with them. But this was leverage on a nuclear scale. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Henderson. I need you to come to the house, right now, and bring a notary. Fiona, it's Sunday, he said, but I heard the click of his car keys. I know, but I just found out my father committed bank fraud using my assets, and my 30th birthday is tomorrow. I think we need to accelerate the plan. When Mr. Henderson arrived, his face was grim as I walked him through my findings. I showed him the loan documents I'd found online. I showed him the art. He appraised my property without my consent and used it as collateral, Mr. Henderson. What happens when Liam defaults on that loan? Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses. The bank will seize the collateral. They will come for your paintings. Exactly. So, as of tomorrow, when I am the sole, legal, and irrevocable owner of this house, what can I do? A slow smile spread across the lawyer's face. As of tomorrow, Fiona, you can do whatever you want. My 30th birthday began at midnight. I was online, tracking my family's Instagram posts. They were in Rome, posting a blurry photo of a pasta dish. Living the dream, Vance family legacy. At 12:01 a.m., I signed the digital papers Mr. Henderson had queued up. The trust was dissolved. The property was mine. At 9:00 a.m., the first truck arrived. It was not a moving truck. It was an art appraisal and transport service. Please pack and crate every painting on this list, I instructed the white-gloved professionals. They are being moved to a secure, climate-controlled storage vault today. At 9:30 a.m., I called the bank that held the fraudulent loan. I got the number for their corporate fraud department. Hello, I said, my voice crisp and professional. My name is Fiona Vance, and I need to report a significant case of collateral fraud regarding loan number. The rest of the day was a blur of activity. The art was removed. I called a high-end estate sale company. I called a cleaning service. I called a locksmith. And finally, I called a moving and storage company. Yes, I said, looking at the mountain of designer clothes in my mother's closet. I have a 5-bedroom house. I need everything packed and moved out. And I mean, everything. Day 7. The house was an echoing maze of boxes. The estate sale team had been through, tagging furniture, art, and rugs. The art transport service had confirmed my grandmother's paintings were secure in a vault. The cleaning crew had scrubbed every surface, removing the faint, lingering scent of my parents. And the bank's fraud department was enthusiastic. They had already frozen the Vance Innovations account and were launching a full investigation. I was sitting on the floor of my empty attic, eating takeout pizza from a box when my laptop pinged. A video call request. It wasn't from a blocked number. It was from a new international prepaid number. They were getting creative. I sighed, wiped my hands, and clicked accept. My father's face filled the screen. He was on a hotel balcony, the Amalfi Coast glittering behind him. He looked tan, relaxed, and furious. "Fiona," he barked without preamble, "what is this nonsense? Your mother and I have been calling for days." "I know," I said calmly, taking another bite of pizza. "I've been busy." "Busy? Busy doing what? Sulking in your room?" he scoffed. "And what was that ridiculous text you sent? Safe travels. Your mother was very hurt by your sarcasm." "It wasn't sarcasm," I said. "I genuinely hoped you would have a safe trip. I didn't want anything to interrupt your vacation." He narrowed his eyes. He wasn't used to this version of me. He was used to the quiet, retreating Fiona. This calm, pizza-eating Fiona was new, and it unnerved him. "Well, your little stunt failed," he said. "We are having a wonderful time, but we've decided to be merciful. We're willing to forgive you for your attitude at the airport. All you have to do is call the bank, approve the HELOC for Liam, and we'll consider the matter closed. We might even bring you back a souvenir." I almost laughed. "A HELOC? Dad, I think you have bigger problems." Just then, my mother's face squeezed into the frame, her hair wrapped in a towel. "Fiona, darling, tell your father to stop shouting. What is going on with the credit cards? My card was declined at the boutique today. It was mortifying." "Was it?" I asked, feigning surprise. "That's so strange. Maybe you hit your limit." "Don't be ridiculous," Cynthia snapped. "Your father handles the limits. Richard, tell her to fix this." My father's face darkened. "She's right, Fiona. The Vance Innovations account is frozen. The bank won't tell me why. They said something about a complaint." "Did you do something? Did you, in some childish fit of pique, call the bank?" "I did," I said, setting the pizza box aside. "I called the bank that you and Liam used to get a $250,000 loan." My father's tan face went pale. That is a private business matter. It has nothing to do with you." "It has everything to do with me, Dad. You see, the collateral you used for that loan, the private art collection, that was my property. Property left to me, and only me, by Nana Alera." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "Richard, what is she talking about?" My father's eyes darted off screen. He was trapped. It was a misunderstanding, a clerical error. The paintings are part of the house, Fiona. They are a family asset. "No, Dad," I said, and my voice was suddenly as sharp and cold as steel. "They are my assets, and using them to secure a loan without my knowledge isn't a clerical error. It's bank fraud. That's the term the investigators used anyway. They were very interested in Vance Innovations, LLC." My father looked like I had physically struck him. He was speechless. What did you tell them?" he finally stammered. "I told them the truth," I said. "That the owner of the collateral had no knowledge of the loan and that the paintings were, as we spoke, being moved to a secure vault. The bank was very grateful. They don't like being defrauded." My mother started to make a high-pitched E sound. You traitor," my father roared, his composure shattering. "You would destroy your own family. You would ruin your brother's future over a few ugly paintings. They're not just paintings, Dad. They're my grandmother's legacy. A legacy you tried to steal to fund Liam's latest fantasy. And you thought I was so stupid, so broke and powerless that I would just— What? Not notice. I stood up and walked the laptop over to the attic window, which overlooked the long, curving driveway. The sun was setting. You seem to have forgotten something very, very important, I said, my voice soft now. What? He whispered, his face a mask of dread. My birthday. It was 2 days ago. I'm 30. The confusion on his face was almost comical. What? Happy birthday? What does that have to do with anything? The trust, Dad, I said, letting the silence stretch. The birthday clause. The one Nana Alera put in to protect the house from you. The clause that said on my 30th birthday, the trust dissolves and I become the sole, irrevocable owner of the property. No executor, no co-signers, just me. I watched the realization dawn, a slow, sickening wave of horror washing over his features. He knew. He had known, and he had forgot. Or, more likely, he'd believed it would never hold up. Fiona, he said, his voice a desperate, wheedling thing I had never heard before. Fiona, don't be hasty. We can sort this out. There's nothing to sort out, I said. You're in Italy, I'm here, I'm just cleaning out the house. What did you do? My mother shrieked, grabbing the phone. Fiona, what did you do? I'm securing my assets, I said. Which, as it turns to, includes the house you live in. I have to go, I have a moving truck arriving in the morning. Have fun in Florence. Don't let your cards get declined again. Oh, wait. I ended the call. I sat in the silence of the empty attic, my heart pounding. The threats would come next. The pleading, the love bombing, but it was too late. The machine was already in motion. The next 3 days were an exercise in logistical warfare. The moving company I'd hired was efficient, professional, and blessedly non-judgmental. They packed every porcelain figurine, every leather-bound book, every designer suit and silk blouse. They dismantled the 12-foot dining table. They rolled up the Persian rugs that my father so loved to boast about. My parents, predictably, went nuclear. My phone, which I had unblocked to monitor the chaos, was a constant stream of vitriol. It started with my father. You are a disgrace. You will undo this immediately. I have called our lawyer, and he is going to have you disowned. I laughed. His lawyer was Mr. Henderson, who was currently on retainer for me. Then came my mother. Fiona, my baby, you are not well. The stress has made you sick. Please stop this. We can talk about it. I'll make your father apologize. Just let us come home. Please, darling, I love you. This one gave me pause. The old, familiar guilt twisted in my stomach. But then I remembered her face at the airport. The cold, triumphant look in her eyes as she'd walked away. This wasn't love. This was damage control. The most pathetic and most revealing messages came from Liam. Fiona, you have to stop this. The bank took all my money, all of it. I have $50 in my account. This isn't funny. This was my big break. He was followed by, you're a jealous hag. You've always been jealous of me. You're just mad no one loves you. Dad's goy. NG to sue you for everything you have. I didn't reply to a single one. Instead, I built my case. Mr. Henderson's office prepared the eviction notices. They were ironclad, citing not just my ownership, but the occupants, willful destruction of assets and history of financial malfeasance, which sounded much better than my dad stole my paintings. He also filed for a temporary restraining order, citing the fraudulent bank loan and the history of financial abuse and intimidation. It would keep them from being able to approach me or the property, giving me the space I needed to sell it. This is going to be messy, Fiona, Mr. Henderson warned me over the phone. They will fight this. They will paint you as an ungrateful, unstable daughter. Let them, I said, watching the movers load my mother's vanity into the truck. I'm not the broke daughter anymore. I'm the owner, and I have the receipts. The receipts were piling up. The bank, now in full damage control mode, had forwarded me, as the victim of the fraud, the entire loan file. It was worse than I thought. My father and Liam had submitted forged documents, fake profit and loss statements for Vance Innovations, and a clearly photoshopped appraisal of my grandmother's art. The bank's internal investigator had scheduled a call with me for the day after my family returned to discuss our next steps regarding prosecution. They were in serious criminal trouble. Their 10-day trip was coming to an end. The house was empty. It was sterile. I had the cleaners do a final, deep clean. The hardwood floors gleamed. The windows sparkled. It was no longer their home. It was no longer my prison. It was just a house. A very valuable, very empty house. The moving trucks had taken everything, all of their clothes, their furniture, their trophies, their brand, and deposited it all into a high-security storage unit. A unit I had paid for 1 month. On the final day, day 10, the FOR sale sign went up. I'd hired the best realtor in the city. She was ruthless, efficient, and smelled opportunity. The sign was massive, red and white, planted right in the center of the perfectly manacled lawn. For sale, it screamed. Prime property, motivated seller. I waited inside. The locksmith had already come. The new keys felt heavy and solid in my hand. I had a process server, a stoic man named Frank, sitting in the kitchen with me, drinking coffee. I had a copy of the restraining order and the eviction notice, all in a neat manila envelope. I'd tracked their flight. They were due to land at 4:05 p.m. The cab ride would take 45 minutes. At 4:50 p.m., I heard the familiar rumble of a taxi coming up the long, curving driveway. "Showtime," I murmured. I walked to the front door, Frank the process server just behind me, and stepped out onto the porch. The taxi pulled up the driveway and stopped, its engine idling. For a moment, nothing happened. I could almost feel the confusion radiating from the car. This wasn't the triumphant return they had planned. The back door opened, and my father got out. He stood there, his expensive travel suit rumpled, a look of profound, disbelieving confusion on his face. He stared at the FOR sale sign. His gaze traveled from the sign to the empty windows and then, finally, to me. I was standing on the porch, my arms crossed, holding a set of new keys. I was wearing a simple black dress, my hair was pulled back, and I had never felt taller. Cynthia and Liam tumbled out after him, dragging their carry-on luggage. "Richard, what is that?" Cynthia's voice was shrill. "What is that sign? Why is it, Richard?" "Fiona," my father roared. It was the last bluff of a desperate man. "What is the meaning of this? You take that sign down, right now." He started to march up the walkway, his face puce. "I wouldn't," I said, my voice calm and carrying easily in the afternoon air. "You're not allowed on this property." "Not allowed?" He stopped, bewildered. "This is my house." "No," I said, holding up the new keys. They glinted in the sun. "It's my house. As of 12:01 a.m. 5 days ago, the trust is dissolved. The property is mine, and you are trespassing." Liam, ever the fool, tried to push past him. "She's bluffing, she wouldn't dare." He ran up the steps, grabbing for the doorknob. I didn't flinch. He twisted the knob, it didn't budge. He threw his shoulder against the door, it was solid. "The locks have been changed, Liam," I said. "This is Frank," I continued, gesturing to the man beside me. "He's a process server, and he has some papers for you." Frank stepped forward, his expression bored, and offered the manila envelope to my father. "Richard Vance." My father just stared at him, breathing hard. "You've been served," Frank said, dropping the envelope at his feet when he refused to take it. He then handed separate ones to Cynthia and Liam. "What is this?" Cynthia whispered, her hands trembling as she opened the seal. A restraining order. Eviction, what does this mean?" "It means," I explained, as if to a child, "that you have to leave. You are legally barred from coming within 500 feet of me or this property." My father finally found his voice. It was a strangled whisper. Where is our stuff?" "Your stuff?" I asked. "You mean the designer clothes, the Art Deco furniture, the souvenirs from a lifetime of living beyond your means? It's all safe. It's in a storage unit, paid for by me for 30 days. After that, the bill is yours. The address and the key are in that envelope." My mother let out a sound, a wounded animal cry, and her knees buckled. She crumpled onto her designer suitcase. "Our things? In storage? Like common people." The sheer, unadulterated snobbery of it, even in her moment of ruin, was breathtaking. "But where will we go?" Liam asked, his voice cracking. He looked, for the first time, like the 26-year-old child he was. "We have no money. You froze the accounts." "That wasn't me, Liam. That was the bank's fraud department," I said. "And they are very interested in talking to you and Dad about that $250,000 loan, the one you secured with my art. They're calling it wire fraud and bank fraud. Those are federal offenses." This was the final blow. My father visibly staggered. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a gray, ashen terror. He finally understood. This wasn't a family squabble. This wasn't a lesson. This was the end. You did this," he whispered, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You, my own daughter, you destroyed us." "No, Dad," I said, and my voice was clear, strong, and free of the tremor I'd lived with my entire life. "You destroyed yourselves. You did it with every maxed-out credit card, every fake business, every sneer, and every lie. You just assumed I'd be the broke daughter forever, your little digital artist who would clean up the mess and pay for your lives." I stepped back toward the door. "You had 10 days in Italy. You should have stayed. The taxi is still here. I suggest you pay him." My mother began to sob, great racking sobs. Liam just stared at the house, his mouth open. My father looked at me. His eyes, which had always been so full of arrogance and dismissal, were now hollow. He saw me, really saw me for the first time, and he saw that he had lost. I watched them, the peacocks suddenly featherless. "Have fun watching us leave, broke daughter," my father had said. I looked at the three of them, stranded in the driveway of a house that was no longer theirs, with their suitcases, their eviction notices, and their impending criminal charges. I turned around, walked into my house, and locked the door. The silence that descended after the taxi finally drove away was the most profound peace I had ever felt. The aftermath was, as Mr. Henderson had predicted, messy. But it was a mess I was fully equipped to handle. My parents and Liam, left with no other options, went to a hotel. Their brief stay was funded by my mother pawning a diamond tennis bracelet. They hired a lawyer, a cheap, aggressive man who immediately filed a countersuit, claiming I had exerted undue influence on my grandmother and that the trust was invalid. It was thrown out of court in a single hearing. Mr. Henderson simply presented the trust documents, my grandmother's signed affidavits of mental competence, and a detailed record of my father's 10-year history of trying to access my grandmother's funds. The judge didn't just dismiss their case. He warned their lawyer about filing frivolous lawsuits. The real trouble for them was the bank. The fraud investigation was swift. Faced with a mountain of evidence, the forged appraisals, the fake P and LS, the testimony from me, the bank had no choice but to act. They were going to make an example of Vance Innovations. My father and Liam were indicted. It was a quiet, pathetic end. My father, in a desperate attempt to save his golden child, took the fall for everything. He pleaded guilty to wire fraud and bank fraud in exchange for Liam's charges being reduced to a misdemeanor and probation. Richard Vance, the man who lived for his reputation, was sentenced to 18 months in a minimum security federal prison. My mother was adrift. Without my father's drive and my house's prestige, her identity collapsed. She moved into a small, furnished apartment, paid for by the forced sale of her jewelry. Liam, under probation, was forced to get a real job for the first time in his life. He ended up working in the stockroom of a big-box electronics store. The house sold in less than 24 hours. The market was high, and the property was beautiful. The sale closed for $50,000 over asking. I never spoke to them again. My mother sent a few tear-stained, manipulative letters, which I returned, unopened. My real life, the one I had hidden for so long, finally began. I took the proceeds from the sale and my own significant savings, and I left. I moved across the country to a small coastal town where no one knew my name. I bought a modest, beautiful home with a view of the ocean. I kept my grandmother's paintings, hanging them in a sunlit studio where I, ironically, took up digital art, this time, for real, as a hobby. I still work as a fraud investigator. I'm one of the best in my field. I lead a team now, and I teach seminars on financial forensics. I still live modestly, not out of fear, but out of preference. My life is quiet, stable, and mine. Sometimes I think about that day at the airport. The casual cruelty of my father's broke daughter comment. He meant it to be a curse. He meant it to be an anchor, a final, definitive label of my worthlessness. But he was wrong. It wasn't a curse. It was a release. In that moment, he and my brother, they didn't just cancel my ticket. They canceled my obligation. They canceled my guilt. They cut the last, frayed rope of family duty that had kept me tied to them. They thought they were leaving me with nothing. They had no idea they were finally giving me everything.